There are actually there are two roundtables. One is the Civil War Roundtable, and the other is the American Revolution Roundtable. I'm really glad to see so many people here for a Civil War Roundtable. For some reason, people don't want to think of the Civil War. They don't think it's relevant. Recently, I was mentioning, I'll show you these brochures, these rack cards. I was recently bringing in the rack cards into the tourism in Morristown, and the fellow looked at them, he said, "Ooh, Civil War." And then he said, "Did you see the exhibit at McCullough Hall? Civil War." The frightening thing about it, the guy was head of the Historical Society. So that's the reaction I got for a guy from the Civil War. Briefly, let me just tell you what we are. If you belong to the Elks or the Moose, you belong to a post. If you belong to a war veteran group, you belong to a post. The others a lodge. If you belong to a history group, you're called a round table. We don't have any more round tables. We have big crowds. We have fairly sized, you've seen our crowds, 75, 85 people come to a meeting. We have one of the largest Civil War roundtables in the United States. And the American Revolution started because of John Cunningham. I was in charge of programming, and John Cunningham wrote his book, The Uncertain Revolution, how Washington and the Continental Army came to Morristown. And I said to John, "I want you to come to the meeting and talk about your book." And John said, "I can't do that, it's Civil War." I said, I'm in charge of programming. Just an aside, what happens when you hit the God bless you age, you can pretty much do whatever you want. The God bless you age is somebody asks you how old you are, you tell them and they say, "Oh, God bless you." If you're nice, you tell them they look good for their age, okay? In any event, John showed up. We have our meetings at the Frelinghuysen Arboretum, and 175 people showed up. We were 2 seats away from fire code. And I turned to John after, I said, "Have you ever considered the American Revolution?" He says, "Have I? Norman Tomlinson and I have always talked about it." So that's when you met Harry and 5 others. Three others met, and as most places do, we met in a diner. And I said, "We'll have a meeting. If nobody shows up, we don't have a second one." And it's not neurosurgery. Nobody will die. So we had a meeting, and we are now the largest American Revolution roundtable in the United States. We will be approaching over 200 members through this. One of the things I will give our roundtable isn't just a group of people who like history. People seem to think we're reenactors. We're not. We're just people who like history. And I'll compare it to people who go to hear a concert. I have no intention of going up there and playing the violin. I just want to listen to the music, leave me alone. The same thing if you go to a play. We're people who like history. And because of the group and the extent of who we are, we present a very prestigious group of speakers. And I'm very proud. In our Civil War Roundtable, we have had 2 Pulitzer Prize winners, James McPherson, and we've had Eric Foner, who won the 2011 Pulitzer Prize. We had Lincoln Prize winner, his name is Craig Simons. Last year at our joint dinner, which we have with the American Revolution Roundtable, which incidentally has had a Pulitzer Prize winner, Edwin Burroughs, who won it for Gotham, not about the American Revolution, but he did write a book about the American Revolution, and he will be our guest for dinner, which we have at the Basking Ridge Country Club, and that will be David Hackett Fisher, who won the Pulitzer Prize for Washington's Crossing. We've honored Governor Kane at our dinner. Last year, we honored Revolutionary War Jersey City icon Thomas Fleming. And as long as I'm speaking, I might as well give a plug. This Thursday, we are going to have, his name is A. Wilson Green. He's executive director of Pamplin Park, and that was the Battle of Petersburg. And he's coming up. A number of our people have been on a tour. I invite you to come. You're my guest, so you don't pay an admission fee. I got a right to do that, I'm president. But in any event, we will have about 65 or 75 people at the Frelinghuysen Arboretum, and I always say the time is at 7:14. And the reason I write 7:14 is you'll remember that. If I said at 7:30, you'll come at 8. If I said 8, you'll come at 9. But I say 7:14. And you know where the Frelinghuysen Arboretum is. And in 2 weeks, we will have at the American Revolution, that meets the second Thursday, we will have William Fowler. And he's really an icon. He was on Book TV last week speaking. So we've had some heavy-duty names. One of the things with the Roundtable, although we are not a fundraising organization, and this will become to the topic. I keep standing here like it's a microphone. I got to talk into the pen here? No. In any event, the topic I'll be speaking about, you've all read about it, it's New Jersey Goes to War, and it'll be part of it. This is a book that's published by the New Jersey Sesquicentennial Committee. Oh, I hate, every time I say that, I hate to say it. But in any event, this is the commemoration, not celebration, this is the commemoration of the 150th year of the Civil War. We are part of a group, our roundtable is part of a group with other roundtables, other historical societies that meet to commemorate the Civil War. And one of the things the committee did was publish a book called New Jersey Goes to War. Our roundtable said, we will donate this book to every library in Morris County. If they want it, don't ask. In any event, we will donate it, and we have. I believe we donated. The only thing we said was rather than just throw it on the table at the library, who said, oh, thanks, throw it over there, we just insist that the book be presented by one of our members to the library, get the publicity for yourself, for the organization, for the library, and obviously for the roundtable. So at the end of the night, you got to remind me of this, we have, I bought, they're not for sale, we will be donating 2 copies to both Mendham libraries from our organization. That's what they're here for. So, and because John is a member, and because he's in Mendham, I want him in the picture. That's the deal. You got to be a member of the group. You got to get in the picture. Okay? The other thing, what we have done is at the Frelinghuysen Arboretum, there's an exhibit. It's called Medicinal Plants of the Civil War. The director of the museum, her name is Dr. Leslie Parness, and she's the head of studies there. And she says, you know, Rich, you always hear about the arms and legs being thrown out, cut off and thrown out of the windows. What about medicinal plants? And what she did was she presented a PowerPoint presentation going through quite a number of plants. And it was really interesting. Some of these plants were used as sedatives, some were used as opium, various plants that were used for the treatment that you do not hear about. And when she completed this, remember I have a group of people who like battles, like all kinds of stuff. Nobody ever approached plants of the Civil War. And also as a tie-in, we had 3 members of the Frelinghuysen Arboretum gardeners who attended our meeting and stayed to become members. But in any event, the way you do this, it's not a very big exhibit. It's not much bigger than these 2 tables. But when you come into the museum, I'm sorry, when you come onto the grounds of the Arboretum, you take your cell phone and you dial a number, and it says, this is opium. Opium was used, whatever it was used for. And you go plant by plant for this. They have found, over last year, the year before, over 7,000 calls were made to this, and they're able to tell the states. Over 46 states have called in. State of Washington, Oregon, California. Nevada was a plant, my daughter lives there, but that's okay. But Texas, Kansas. And what happens, also 12,000 visitors come through here. Although there are other names on here, Provident Bank, North Jersey, we pay for it ourselves. This is our donation to the county or to the Friends of the American Revolution. And recently, I met one of the, let's put it this way, he was, I think he's a county executive or something like that, and they were sort of telling me what they were doing for me. And remember I told you in the God Bless You age, I pointed my finger. I said, let me tell you something, we pay for this, not you. He went, okay. In any event, this is our funding, and I'm very proud of this. And we are doing it again this year. This is the rack card that you'll see. It'll be placed, hopefully, in all the libraries. Started the libraries. I put them, walked into Provident Bank. And again, I don't take prisoners. I said, you see your name on there? You go, yeah. Okay, I'm putting them on a counter. Okay. I can't get them in Sovereign Bank, but it says Provident Bank on here. But anyway, this is one of the things that we're doing here. Let me go into the topic itself that came here. And I want to bring in portions of history and relative to New Jersey. and also Mendham. I'm not going to do Mendham to any extent, really. You know, Abner Doubleday lived here. He didn't invent baseball, but he retired in Mendham. Okay, you know enough about Abner Doubleday. The other one you won't be hearing about either, is down the road, is Joseph Revere. And the reason, when he finishes the book, his name is Bill Shimerka. He's the best speaker you'll ever have. He is writing a book on Joseph Revere. So there's enough people who do those two topics, but I want to come in more into other areas of what makes this important. If you go into Morristown, there is a magnificent obelisk. It's over 50 feet tall, and it's by Morris County, dedicated to the Civil War. And on the top of this obelisk is a statue of a man, and it's called Soldier at Peace. On the sides are the battles they list, and they really don't bear any sense to the direction they're facing, so I'll just rattle them off. These are the men where they fought in Morris County. There's Shiloh, that's Tennessee, one of the greatest one-day losses, 20,000 casualties. The Wilderness, another 20,000, where men just went in totally into woods. Malvern Hill, and that was part of the 7-day campaign. Roanoke, Winchester, Gettysburg, Antietam, Vicksburg, Appomattox at the end of the war, Atlanta, Donaldson, and Cold Harbor, where there were 7,000 men that were lost in 1 hour. So these people came out of Morristown, and when you look at it, you realize these are somebody's sons, and these are somebody's children. And I got older now, I begin to appreciate it. And suddenly everybody becomes a lot younger. Thinking back when I was in service, these are kids. I was a little older, but we were kids. But one monument got to me, and it's odd. If you've gone to Rockaway Borough, at the First Presbyterian Church on Church Street in Rockaway Borough, there's another obelisk. It's not as big. It's only about 30 feet tall, and again, it has the soldier. Now, this only has 4 sides on it. Side 1 is Gettysburg. Everybody knows Gettysburg. One of the largest losses in 3 days. Petersburg, that's at the end of the war. And by the way, the speaker I have coming up on Thursday, and I wish you would come, he will be speaking about the fall of Gettysburg, especially the last day. Really terminates the end, starting to terminate the major battle right towards the end of within a week to go, the war is going to be over. Spotsylvania. This is another area that had horrible, horrible casualties. Again, part of the Wilderness Campaign. And then finally, the 4th side says Cumberland River. And unless you know what Cumberland River is, why did they put Cumberland River? And I ran a trivia question. I ran it out to people. I said, why Cumberland River? Nobody answered. And very frankly, neither could I until somebody told me, you know, what this was about. So let me tell you what it was about. And again, let me backdoor a little bit. We are coming up to Memorial Day. We all remember, I'm looking at the crowd, we all remember it was Decoration Day. Let's get back to the relevance of our time. In 1865, a man by the name of General Logan saw Confederate women placing flowers on the graves of the soldiers. It really started in the South. General Logan comes back and he says, we should do this to the Union. And he is one of the first heads of the GAR, the Grand Army of the Republican. And he brings this back and he says, we are going to do this, which are now the United States. And what happens a year later, he was the 3rd Commander-in-Chief of the GAR, and he writes the order, designating May 30th, 1868 as the first Decoration Day. A year later, at the Presbyterian Church in Rockaway, the people gathered and said, we will create a memorial. Remember, this is going to be for the Cumberland River. Why? At that time, Rockaway Township was composed of Rockaway Borough, and there were portions of Denville and Boonton all in part of it. And while it was widespread in the area,
They had 3,500 people. 710 of these were men. In comparison, I looked up the numbers. You'll have to bear with me. 5,080 people are in the borough today, and the township listed at 5,869. In any event, they had, over this, 710 were being mailed. 1/3 of these men will go to war. Figure out your own numbers. The soldiers who lost the war, what had happened, they were part of the Company L 27th Regiment of New Jersey. They were in Kentucky early in the war. What happens is Lincoln will not attack Kentucky because he doesn't want to bring Kentucky into the war. Kentucky is a slaveholding state. Lincoln says, if I attack Kentucky, they're going to join the other side. One of the great lines that Lincoln says is, I hope God is on our side, but I must have Kentucky. In any event, under General Morgan, who's a Confederate general, he comes into Kentucky. And at that point, Kentucky says, okay, we're not leaving the Union. But Company L, and part of it, goes in to drive General Morgan out of Kentucky, which they do. On the way back, they are going from Stanford, they're going to Somerset. And they're going back to get the regular supplies, and they come to the Cumberland River. The Cumberland River is under flood stage at this point. The river is beating very strongly. There are two ropes that are going across the river. The upper road, they're carrying the artillery, the heavy boats, etc. I'm sorry, the other way around. The lower boat is carrying the heavy artillery. The upper boat is they are taking rowboats to extend them. And the soldiers are getting on board, about 60 people in these large boats, fully weighted down by their equipment. These guys have the knapsack, have the rifle, it's everything else. And they are in the upper boat going across. And the way they would do it is they were pulling their way across on the rope. Too difficult to row, but they had to pull themselves. Suddenly, something happens, and the rope, they lose, the guy in charge of holding on to this thing loses it, and the boat drifts downstream. And it's going down sideways. And what happens is the guys on board the boat, as the boat's coming, is they reach for the other rope. Unfortunately, the boat flips. And what happens at this point, is 27 men die in one shot from this town. Think about it. Think of the comparison. Do your own arithmetic in here. In one shot, these guys die. And just reading it, he says, one of the writing back, after driving out of Kentucky, he says, when they reached the river, they found two ropes across, fastened about 100 yards apart to two trees. The artillery was crossing by the lower road, and the infantry by the upper one. On flat boats, boats drift, okay, lost his count. Reaching the lower rope, the men manfully endeavored to throw the rope over their heads, but the current swelled by the recent rains was swift, and the boat was overturned with 60. 32 of the 60 are drowned. 19 come directly from that small town, Rockaway. They lose, think of those numbers right now. 60 of your, so you learned today that 60 guys, or calculate out, 45 guys out of Mendham would die tomorrow in Afghanistan. What a horror this must have been. I walked through the cemetery. I'm not one of these guys, I'm not a genealogist, but I did walk through the cemetery. They have one of the soldiers listed, buried in Kentucky. Kid was 17 years old. That's horror. This is what I'm talking about. This is the reality of war. This is the reality of life, and this is the reality of our neighbors over here. And this, it's sort of hurt. And there's one or two others who were part of this regiment who lasted here. So these are the real people and the real loss of war. And this is what we're encountering today. Unfortunately, I've heard other people say this, and it minimizes to a large extent. We hear about somebody locally being killed with honors, etc. But when you think about these people, under that poor time, losing in one shot, what a horrendous, horrendous thing that has to be. I don't care, every death's important, especially now that you see them to a certain extent. And to an extent, as quartermaster of my war veteran group, we're trying to help the veterans. So let me tell you something. These are kids. It really hurts, especially the IED missiles. So the relevance of the war today and the relevance then lives on, and it lives on in the communities that think enough to honor them. Unfortunately, Memorial Day, and the thing is, where are you going to have your barbecue? What are you going to do? It's the first weekend of summer. And nobody remembers. Now it's Memorial Day. Changing the subject on another topic, to do something local. Some of you may mention a name. Let me give it to the end. And these start to come out of the book now. A few of these are going to start to come out of the book. And the name of the book is, that's a great name. The name of the book is New Jersey Goes to War, Biographies of 150 New Jerseyans Caught Up in the Struggle of the Civil War, including soldiers, civilians, men, women, heroes, scoundrels, and a heroic horse. My contribution to the book is they were going to do about the 150 and they were going to include the horse. I said include the horse in the title. Unfortunately, there were a few academians and they said, oh, you don't do that. I said, for God's sakes, you put a heroic horse on the cover, it sells. In any event, the horse, I'll briefly go into it. Father Sheeran, and I will come back to this, and this is local. Father Sheeran's born in Ireland. At the age of 36, he becomes a priest. Up till this time, until the age of 36, he is married and he has a child. His wife dies. And at that point, he migrates by himself to Canada. From Canada, he ends up in Louisiana. And in Louisiana, he becomes part of the Louisiana Tigers. He hates Yankees in the worst way. He is pro-Confederate. And here is a guy, he is a no-nonsense, take-no-prisoner type of guy. And he somehow gets, part of the things, he gets assigned to Stonewall Jackson. Now, people who study a little about Stonewall Jackson, he was a general, also take-no-prisoner type of guy, and he was extremely rough on everybody. It says no, now, he says he gets into an argument with Jackson, and he says to Jackson, I want you to understand that I am a priest of God. I outrank everyone in your command. And Jackson, who hates Catholics, listens to him. A little later, they get into it, and he's listening while Jackson is giving orders, and he says, I think you should do so-and-so. And Jackson said to him, look, either I run the army or you run the army. At that point, Jackson leaves. Sheeran leaves. The Battle of Fredericksburg, he's present at the Battle of Fredericksburg. Now, picture this river down here, picture the stream down here with the slight hill, you'll get a rough idea. The Rappahannock River is below Fredericksburg. General Burnside is now in charge of the army. And the big thing is they have to cross the river, and then once they're at 400 or 500 yards, straight up a hill, fairly steep hill, and at the top of the hill is a stone wall. And the Confederate soldiers are shooting at the soldiers as they're coming up. And basically it becomes almost a massacre. And it comes on 5 different waves. But after the first wave of soldiers goes up the hill, is shot, they come back again. After the first or second wave, a priest enters the field, and it's Father Sheeran. They're laying on the ground. He says to them, do you denounce before I give absolution, do you denounce the Union? The soldiers who didn't get absolution. And as they had more of the waves, Father Sheeran would again come out. Do you announce the Union? He goes back. All right, so why do I mention Father Sheeran? At the end of the war, Father Sheeran comes to Morristown. He's assigned to Morristown. You know the Assumption Church? He's the guy who built it up. When he eventually dies, he is now the only Confederate chaplain buried in Morris County. These are real people. If you know Jim Hennessy from Hennessy's, Jim will tell you a story about him. The people to this day, he was a take-no-prisoner guy, made more enemies, but he still built it up to one of the largest churches, and it's a beautiful church. That's Father Sheeran. So you have relevance in this area to our community. One woman they mentioned in the book, and this to me, I think she, what time did I start?
8 o'clock.
8 o'clock. Okay, got 15. Let me do. I'll tell you what I'll do. Let me do Cornelia Hancock. I met an author who wrote Alan Siegel, who wrote a book about the New Jersey, and one of the characters he came across, his name is Cornelia Hancock, and he was an author who actually fell in love with somebody he encountered back in history. And I think after you hear who Cornelia Hancock is, I think you'll agree with me, because he wrote very extensively about her, and the more he wrote about her, the more he fell in love with her. It's really a great thing. I don't know if you've ever done that. I've met authors who really have written about people and characters. I met John Waugh, who wrote about character, and he's totally in love with her. Unfortunately, she died 100 years ago. But listen to Cornelia Hancock. She's born in February 1840 in South Jersey. Contrary to a lot of belief, South Jersey was not because it was below the Mason-Dixon line. Mason-Dixon line has nothing to do with New Jersey. She was part of a Quaker family, and you know Quakers do not believe in war. The war breaks out, and Cornelia Hancock, in 1863, her brother goes to Gettysburg. He's a doctor. He's going to help out. Cornelia Hancock wants to be a nurse, wants to help out. Family is totally against a young girl going out to take care of soldiers. This is a different time and a different era. Women did not see a man undressed. They were dressed, men were dressed. This is something a woman does not do. Cornelia Hancock goes to Dorothea Dix, who's in charge of the nurses. Dorothea Dix has, her plan is, a woman has to be over 30. She has to be very plain looking, not good looking at all, has to wear brown and has to wear gray or black, and be plain, no, nothing else. Cornelia Hancock doesn't fit that at all. She's pretty. She's rosy-cheeked, a very pretty girl. She looks at her and says, you can't come. You can't be part of my nurses. So what does Hancock do? She goes out to the battlefield herself and arrives on the battlefield 3 days after the battle is over. The battle is over. They fight the first one July 2nd, July 3rd, and then the 4th, Lee leaves. She now comes 3 days after the battle effectively is over. The Army at this point, to the disgrace, and when you read about this, the war is now 2 years later. They have fought massive battles in Bull Run. They have fought in Shiloh. They have fought Chancellorsville, and yet they don't have the adequate provisions for the men who are wounded in battle, and especially when they leave. Then the ambulances go, and the guys there, and the doctors come. And she comes, and these guys are still lying on the field. And she's not getting paid. So she does this, and she comes out there, and she gets the opportunity, and she's going to start helping. And here's what she writes. She says, she comes here in July 7th. I was the first woman who reached the 2nd Corps after 3 days of the fight of Gettysburg. I was in the Corps all day, not another woman within a half mile. Women are needed very badly. There are no words to express the suffering I witnessed today. The men lie on the ground. Their clothes have been cut off to dress the wounds. They're half naked, have nothing but hardtack to eat them. And the Sanitary Commission, that's before the Red Cross comes into being, starts to feed them. I gave it to every man a leg that had a gill of wine. She's not allowed to do this. Not allowed to have wine or anything, but she gives it to him anyhow. Some bread and preserves and tobacco, which she brings onto the field herself. She loads her own cart and brings it onto the field to take care of these guys. And this is what Cornelia Hancock is doing. On the 8th, she writes to, on the 8th, these people wrote letters, I can't believe this. She writes to her sister, and I'm just going to paraphrase some of the words. The young girl, remember, she's 23 years old at this point. This is what she's doing. We've been on the 2 days on the field. Go out. The surgeons have put us at disposal. Now they're beginning to realize these women are doing something. Surgeons don't want the women there, but our brother-in-law, he's going to take care. He's going to be with her. He'll give her a certain amount of respect. The others don't want them there. What they use for nurses to get the people off the field. The guys in the band would be the stretcher bearers. They knew nothing about it. There were no medics. There was nothing. They weren't learning anything. And the physicians, as far as they were concerned, because of the way these bullets or whatever, these mini balls going through, the bones were crushed, their arms and legs were being cut off. Anything open, there was nothing you could do about it. It didn't get. There was a great want of surgeons here. There are hundreds of brave fellows who have not had their wounds dressed since the battle. This is on the 8th. So they've been laying there now for 5 days. Brave is not the word. More Christian fortitude never was witnessed than any exhibit. Always say, help my neighbor first, he is worse. The 2nd Corps did the heaviest fighting. By the way, the head of the 2nd Corps was General Hancock. He's no relation to her at all. But probably these guys felt that maybe it was a relation, so maybe they're going to listen to her a little bit more, whatever it is. The citizens are stripped of everything. They left, the Confederate Army had gone through Gettysburg and taken everything out that they could take, and the war absolutely destroys it. So he says we're all alone, and they can't even rely on the town. She says, and she says, send clothes, etc. I don't know when I shall be home, how long this hospital stays here, whether another battle will go. I can go right now, but I have to, she says, I have to stay. It took nearly 5 days for some 300 surgeons to perform the amputations that occurred here. And they're taking care of the rebels too. They actually are doing this. One thing she does hate, and she refers to, they're called Copperheads. The Copperhead were the people who were, these were the Northerners who were against the war. She says, I hate them. These guys were still starting trouble. They were coming into camp. And this is what she does. A short while later, and that's what she writes. So here's a tame woman. She says, kill the Copperheads, write everything. Nothing is of interest here. She says, pads are terrible. Bandages and lint are plenty. I'd like to see, etc. There's no impropriety of a young person provided here. They don't care anymore because that she's a woman. She's taking care of them through this. She ends up in a few weeks later, a few months later, and she ends up in a contraband, it's called a contraband hospital. If you recall, they weren't technically allowed, Lincoln wasn't freeing the Negroes weren't freed, etc. What they were calling them contraband. In other words, it's like taking a horse, taking a cow, so they were calling them contraband, and they actually set up a contraband hospital for them. Here's a woman from New Jersey now being exposed to the horrors of slavery in this hospital here. She says, if I were to describe this hospital, it would not be believed. It's a mire. Sickness is inevitable. We average 1 birth a day. The hospital is a reservoir. Now she's talking about the Negroes who were coming in. A reservoir for all cripples, diseased, aged, wounded, infirm from whatever cause. It's not uncommon for a colored driver to be pounded nearly to death by some of the white soldiers. These guys are coming here, and now they're being beaten up by our side. He says, she's talking about a woman. She had been a more forlorn, worn-out creature I ever beheld. Her 4 eldest children are still in slavery. Her husband's dead. When I first saw her, her children crying around her. 1 child died almost immediately. The other 2 are sick. Remember, young girl, 23. There's no nursing here. He says, one of the guards asked me, I got paid for this. I said, no. She's still working for nothing through here. 2 little boys, as he described him, has his head amputated. Now she comes to the slaves that she's seeing. There were 2 very fine-looking slaves derived here from Louisiana. One of them had his master's name branded on his forehead. You don't hear about that in Gone with the Wind. Okay? He brought the instruments of torture he wore at different times during 39 years of hard slavery. I'll send you a photograph of him. He had worn an iron leg with 3 prongs standing up so he could not lay down his head. Then a contrivance to render one leg stiff and a chain clanking 50 pounds behind him. He worked all time hard. At night they hung a little bell with prongs upon his head that if he hid in the bushes they could find him. And the baton that was used to whip them was so constructed a little child could whip them till the blood streamed down the backs. This is what she sees as a young girl. After the war, she doesn't go home. She goes to City Point, which is on Chesapeake Bay. And during that time, she hadn't forgotten anything. She used money from the Quakers in the Freedmen's Bureau for Negroes in South Carolina. She taught for 10 years. And then because of health, she moves to Philadelphia. And she retires in Atlantic City, and she died there at the age of 87. So to me, this is a real live person, one of the people you don't hear about, and one of the things, and this lady is Cornelia Hancock. So when I tell you these stories, these are to me, and there's a few other, the bad, I got the good. I can give you a lecture, your name would appear on milk cartons by the time I finish. But in any event, these are, as far as I'm concerned, these are the real people. And rather than just rattle off, here's where they went to school, here's what they did, I hope you got the impression that these people were us. They're part of us. And we're here today because of people like this. And again, I thank you. Come here, you got to have somebody from Mendham present it to the, you're going to give it to the library, right?
We're going to give it to the library.
Okay, you get it, these books will, don't throw them on a table. Make a presentation of it, come on, okay? No, seriously, we feel it's that important that people know what exists, who the people are, and that's the reason we made it. This is our donation, we purchased this, and we have, as I say, we've donated. We also donated to, if I remember who doesn't live, 30-second digression, a silly a bit. We also said if you don't live, to our members, if you don't live in Morris County, we'll donate it to your library. So one of our members in Flemington, she's in Hunterdon County, she says, Rich, you know, Hunterdon County is horse country. So off I go to the Flemington Library in Clinton, in Clinton, or the big branch library. Make a long story short, in a uniform, a guy on a horse comes up with his wife, both reenactors, and from the horse, he hands me the book, which I hand to the library, and they had a little porch, and about 50 people came out. I know how Brad Pitt feels. And people are snapping all the way through there, and we presented the book.
What about the heroic horse?
Okay, real fast. The heroic horse's name is Restless, and Restless had been, he was sired by, I didn't even know there was a horse by that name. He was sired by Hamiltonian. You know the Hamiltonian? That was his father. Oh, I love saying that. That was his father. Mr. Pimlico. Okay. He was sired by, and what happens is he starts going, he comes in, he's in charge of a chaplain, and through the period of time, they start loaning him out. And towards the end of the war, he now becomes involved in every battle. And what happens is he retires, he gets old, so he retires and they take him back to New Jersey. And he is somewhere near Ogdensburg, and they bury him with he dies, the horse dies. And they bury him with full military honors. And they put a flag on him and everything through this. They don't know where it is. I mean, all this great honor, they don't know where the horse is, but that's the horse Restless. Well, I figured, why not?
You don't know where he's buried?
No. That's contained in the book. They have no idea. I'll tell you. I'll read you one of the things in the book. What do they say about him?
So what did they use him for in the war?
Oh, that's what I said. Okay, he was here. I'll just read it point blank. Okay, he was given as a gift to the New Jersey Infantry. He was deployed in the defense of Washington. Joined the Colonel Fowler had typhoid fever. He goes to a chaplain. He loaned Restless out to fellow officers on occasion, including General, I don't know the, again, names. And they served the staff of the 1st New Jersey, as well as officers on the staff of General Sedgwick and Sheridan. He participated in all of the 15 battles and bore the scars of several wounds received in battle. Chaplain Hayne brings him back to Ogdensburg. He spends the rest of his life as well cared for. He succumbed to the injuries of age at the age of 33 in 1889 and was buried with military honors, body wrapped in an American flag in a conspicuous place on the Haynes property in Ogdensburg. This is unfortunately his gravesite has been lost to the ages. So we got a horse.
Did we have any Congressional Medal of Honor winners?
Yeah, that would have been another. Yes, that would have been. I like Cornelia Hancock. I could have done. You can get his son, Charles Hopkins. He has, not his son, he has a relative living here in Boonton. Charles Hopkins was a Congressional Medal of Honor that lived in Boonton. Again, I have a whole segment. I could do about 15 or 20 minutes, but I like Cornelia better. He is I can't think of it. I was at Powerville, and they did, his relative did it. Hoskins was just an amazing guy. As a young kid, he was ran slaves in the Underground Railroad, saved them, goes into service, fights in major battles, gets wounded for 16 months, comes out, goes back in the battle again, captured, spends time in Andersonville, in their library. There's a book about his writings in Andersonville, and it's later that they covered that he goes out into the field when he's in the Peninsula Campaign, and he drags guys across the field to safety, and he gets awarded it. He dies in 1934 here in Boonton. But that's Hopkins. There's somebody who I heard a great lecture from. That's a good speaker. I can't think of his name, but also interesting people here. So we have a lot of heroes that have come out of this county, and we also have, hey, guys you'll never hear about, people that fought, and people. The book has good guys, bad guys, etc. They wanted to present a composite of a lot of people. And then there's another guy who does a book on Drawer Boy Willie McGee, which is a story by himself. The biggest fraud that got a Congressional Medal of Honor. He's from Newark. But for a battle he never participated in, which becomes the whole part of the subject. The book itself, you know, there's squibs of people, but I think it's important once we get the kids out, they have no idea what the Civil War is, who it was, does it have relevance, why, that was then, it's over, why do we have to discuss it? And we are totally missing out in history. I did something terrible, and I'm not sorry about it either. I'm taking a course, it was called Naval Battles of the Civil War, and they have it. I shouldn't do this because you got a question. I never started this. You remember the old statement, there's nothing like a dumb, there's no such thing as a stupid question? Mm-hmm. Okay, you made it this far in life. There are stupid questions. You know that, right? There really are. So I'm taking this course, and this woman is asking the dumbest questions, finally, and she's wasting the time of the class. I paid for this, so it becomes a lot different. And the questions are dumb, and they're wasting time. Finally, the 5th week, I said, I don't know how to tell you this. Lincoln dies at the end. She never came back. And of course, I got my money's worth at that point. Embarrassing question. Okay, I'll give you one of them. This is embarrassing, and this is how we do not know our history. And I will throw, this is the gauntlet I threw out at our first American Revolution Roundtable. How we don't know our history, all right? Washington crosses the Delaware, right? He fights the Battle of Trenton, 2 of them. Right? He fights the Battle of Princeton. Now they leave. Okay, ready guys? Where does he go? Well, you got to spend the winter, right? It's Christmas Eve, Christmas night. Where does he go afterwards?
Morristown.
Where?
Jockey Hollow.
Wrong.
Up on top of the hill there.
Wrong.
To the courthouse.
Wrong.
Fort Knifton.
Wrong. Absolutely wrong. No, you go to Virginia, Lee made a left turn, there's a monument, there's a horse, there's a statue. Okay. Washington goes there, he goes to Arnold's Tavern, which is on the green, which now becomes Chase Manhattan Bank, which New Jersey didn't think enough of it to save, so there's a plaque in front of it. Jockey Hollow goes 2 years later, but that's our missing point, and I hope you would come to some of our meetings to learn what we missed about our area. You go to Virginia, they're proud of it. New Jersey doesn't give a damn, point blank. They really don't care. One of the things I wanted is rather than have a plaque that says Colonial Capital, American Revolution, I wanted a banner that went across Morristown and said, Morristown, where America survived. You'd come in there and you go, whoa. Well, you have to understand that the sign will be put over a county road, and that's not allowed. They give me 14 reasons. To make a long story short, they have a little plaque that says, everything is the squash capital, the wrestling capital. We don't take pride in our history here. When you think of what you had here, for God's sakes, John Cunningham will tell you about it. Well, fortunately, he's not speaking. But your point in American history here in Mendham, you know, with the Patriots, etc., was an integral part. Going down the road with Jockey Hollow, how many people have heard about it? And the first thing, if you speak to somebody, one of the questions they'll ask is, you know, what battle they fight here? There was no battle here, but it's an important part. We don't know this. Final sentence, the last sentence, I one dumb sign, another dumb line. We're going to have a speaker coming up, and one of the things, he's from the Army Hospital, rather from the Army Museum. Dumb. Okay, you know Yorktown, the trapping Cornwallis on there? At that point, before he was there, he was one of the guides at Yorktown. And they're describing how they go from trench to trench, and one of the guys, straight face, says to him, "Why didn't Washington call in an airstrike?" And he thought fast. He said, "The carriers were busy." Thank you. Well, you have 2 libraries, right?
Two libraries, right?
We have 2 people. We have 2 libraries.
That's it, you got it.
Okay.
No, we're presenting them to you. Do me a favor, if you put something that we donated it, presented by.
Will do.
That's all we ask.
Are we on camera?
Oh, great. So here, 2 directions. My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.